unacceptable.
I'm so sorry, ma'am. Let me fix that for you.
Forget it! I'm leaving!
Ma'am, please.
It was a normal afternoon inside a small neighborhood cafe. Nothing special. Soft music, the smell of coffee, a few customers waiting in line. Behind the counter stood a young employee with Down syndrome. He wore his uniform neatly and smiled as he worked. He moved a little slower than others, but he was careful, focused, trying his best. Most customers were patient. One wasn't. A man in an expensive jacket stepped forward, tapping his fingers on the counter. "What's taking so long?" he said loudly. The employee looked up, a little startled but still polite. "I'm sorry, sir. I'll be right with you." The man sighed dramatically. "Every time?" he muttered. "Why do places like this always hire people who can't do the job?" A few customers exchanged uncomfortable looks. The employee's smile faded slightly, but he didn't argue. He took the order again, carefully repeating it to avoid mistakes. The man rolled his eyes. "Do you even understand what I said?" The words cut deep. The employee paused, then nodded. "Yes, sir." His hands trembled just a little as he reached for the cup. No one stepped in. Some people looked away. Others pretended to check their phones. At a corner table sat a man wearing dark glasses and a black jacket. He had been quiet the entire time, sipping his drink. His name was Ozzy. No cameras, no attention, just another customer. But Ozzy was watching everything. He noticed how the man's voice got louder, how the insults were no longer about coffee, but about worth. "You're too slow," the customer snapped. "This is ridiculous." The employee swallowed hard. "I'm doing my best," he said softly. The cafe went quiet. That sentence hung in the air. Ozzy lowered his cup slightly. His jaw tightened. He had seen a lot in his life: fame, chaos, crowds. But there was something about cruelty aimed at someone who couldn't fight back that hit differently. The customer leaned forward again, unaware. And still, Ozzy stayed seated, for now, because what was about to happen next would change the entire room. And the man abusing that employee had no idea who was watching him. How would you react if you were standing in that cafe?
That's the stuff.
No way! Is it that good?
Told you it was legendary.
You have no idea.
The customer let out a sharp laugh, loud enough for the entire cafe to hear. "Your best," he said. "This is your best." A few heads turned. Conversation stopped. Even the music in the background suddenly felt too loud. The employee stiffened but stayed behind the counter. He nodded again, the way he had probably learned to do many times before. "Yes, sir," he said quietly. "I'll fix it." The customer shook his head in disbelief. "Unbelievable," he said, raising his voice. "I'm paying good money, and this is the service I get. I don't have all day." The employee reached for a new cup, hands moving carefully. His fingers shook slightly now, not because he didn't know what to do, but because every word was being watched, judged. A woman standing behind the customer whispered, "That's not fair." But she didn't say it loud enough for him to hear. Or maybe she was afraid to. The customer leaned over the counter, invading the employee's space. "Are you even trained?" he asked. "Or did they just feel sorry for you and give you a job?" That was when the room truly changed. A heavy silence fell over the cafe. Someone near the door stopped mid-step. Another customer slowly lifted their phone, pretending to check messages, but the camera was on. The employee froze. He looked down at the counter, blinking rapidly, trying to keep himself together. "I can get my manager," he said softly. The customer scoffed. "Yeah, do that, because you clearly can't handle this." At the corner table, Ozzy watched without moving. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes were sharp. He noticed everything. The way the customer smirked, the way the employee's shoulders curled inward, as if trying to disappear. Ozzy had seen arrogance before. He had seen ego, but this wasn't confidence, this was cruelty. The customer wasn't upset about coffee anymore. He was enjoying the power, the attention, the humiliation. "Look at him," the man said loudly, gesturing toward the employee. He doesn't even know what's going on. That was a lie. The employee knew exactly what was going on. His face flushed, his lips pressed together. He took a deep breath, just like he'd probably been taught. "I'm sorry," he said again. The word sorry sounded small in such a big, ugly moment. The manager stepped out from the back, sensing the tension. "What seems to be the problem?" she asked. The customer didn't hesitate. "This," he said, pointing. "This problem. He messed up my order. He's slow, and frankly, he shouldn't be working here." The manager opened her mouth to respond, but before she could speak, the customer cut her off. "No offense," he added sarcastically, "but customers like me shouldn't have to deal with this." More phones were up now. "Not hidden, open." Ozzy shifted in his seat, still quiet, still watching. The employee stood there, cheeks burning, eyes glossy. He didn't cry, he didn't lash out, he just stood, and that somehow made it worse. The customer shook his head again. "This is embarrassing," he said, "for him, for this place." A man near the window finally spoke up. "Hey man, relax, he's trying." The customer turned sharply. "Mind your business." The man backed off. Silence again. The kind of silence that makes people uncomfortable because they know something is wrong, but don't know how to fix it. Ozzy set his cup down slowly, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to signal a decision forming. The customer turned back to the counter, smirking. "I swear, standards don't exist anymore." The employee looked up for a brief second. His eyes met Ozzy's, just for a moment. Ozzy didn't nod, didn't smile, but there was something steady there, something grounding. The employee looked back down. The customer had no idea. No idea that the man sitting quietly just a few steps away had reached his limit. And no idea that the humiliation he was enjoying so much was about to come to a very public end. The customer let out another short, mocking laugh. "You see," he said, shaking his head. "This is exactly what I'm talking about." The employee remained still behind the counter. His hands were clenched now, not in anger, but in effort. Effort to stay composed, to not break down in front of strangers. The manager stood beside him, unsure how to de-escalate the situation without making it worse. "Sir," she said carefully, "we're happy to remake your order or offer a refund." The customer waved her off. "No, that's not the point," he snapped. "The point is, people like him shouldn't be put in positions they clearly can't handle." That was the moment. The line between complaint and cruelty disappeared completely. A collective gasp rippled through the cafe. Someone near the door whispered, "Wow." Another person muttered, "That's messed up." The employee's face went pale. He swallowed hard and shook his head slightly, as if telling himself not to react. His eyes dropped to the counter again. "I can do my job," he said quietly. "I've been working here a long time." The customer smirked. "Sure you have." He leaned forward again, lowering his voice just enough to make it sting more. "You should be grateful they even let you stand here." That sentence hit harder than all the others. The manager's patience finally cracked. "That's enough," she said firmly. "You need to leave." The customer laughed. "Or what?" he said. "You'll have him throw me out?" A few people audibly groaned. Phones were no longer subtle. Several customers were openly recording now. The atmosphere had shifted from awkward to electric. Ozzy watched the employee's reaction closely. The young man's shoulders were tense, but he didn't lash out. He didn't shout. He didn't defend himself loudly. He simply stood there, taking it. And that, to Ozzy, was the most painful part, because real strength wasn't loud. It was silent endurance. The customer glanced around, noticing the phones. "What?" he said defensively. "Am I not allowed to speak the truth?" A woman near the counter spoke up, her voice shaking but clear. "You're being cruel." The customer turned toward her. "Mind your business," he snapped. "If you don't like it, don't watch." The woman looked down, intimidated. The employee finally looked up again. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Please, I'm trying." The room went dead silent. No music, no chatter, just that one sentence hanging in the air. Ozzy felt something tighten in his chest. The customer scoffed, Trying isn't good enough in the real world. That was it. That was the moment the situation crossed from ugly to unacceptable. The manager reached for the phone behind the counter. "I'm calling security," she said. The customer rolled his eyes. "Go ahead. Make a scene." The employee flinched at the word scene, as if the attention itself was something he feared. Ozzy stood up, not fast, not angry, just calm. The sound of the chair sliding back caught a few people's attention. The customer didn't notice yet. He was too busy feeling powerful. "Honestly," he said, turning back to the counter, "this place should be ashamed." Ozzy took one step forward, then another. He stopped a few feet away. The customer finally turned. "What?" he snapped. "You got a problem too?" Ozzy looked at him steadily. "Yes," he said. One word, clear, controlled. The cafe froze. The employee looked at Ozzy, eyes wide, not scared, but uncertain. The customer frowned. "And who are you supposed to be?" Ozzy didn't answer immediately. He glanced at the employee, then back at the man who thought humiliation was entertainment. And in that quiet pause, everyone in the cafe sensed it. The balance of power had just shifted. What would you do if someone treated a vulnerable person like this
Here you
in
go.
public?
That'll be $5. Thanks, mate. Name's Ozzy, by the way. Male high. Ozzy, cool name. Enjoy your drink.
Ozzy stood still, his posture relaxed but grounded. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't puff out his chest. There was no anger in his expression, only control. The customer sized him up with a dismissive glance. "Mind your business," the man said. "This doesn't concern you." Ozzy tilted his head slightly. "It does," he replied calmly. The simplicity of the answer caught the customer off guard. "How?" the customer snapped. "You work here now too?" Ozzy shook his head. "No," he said. "I'm just someone who knows when something's wrong." A few people in the cafe leaned in, almost instinctively. This was different from the earlier tension. This felt steady. The customer scoffed. "What's wrong is my order," he said loudly. "And this guy," he pointed toward the employee, "can't do his job." Ozzy didn't look at the pointing finger. He looked at the employee. The young man stood frozen, unsure where to put his eyes. Ozzy spoke again, his voice even. "He's doing his job," he said. "You're the one making it impossible." The customer laughed sharply. "Oh, please," he said. "Don't pretend you know what you're talking about." Ozzy nodded once. "I know enough." He turned slightly so the employee wasn't alone anymore, placing himself just beside him, not in front of him, not blocking him, but standing as an equal. That small movement mattered. The employee noticed it immediately. The customer noticed too. "What are you doing?" the customer asked. "Trying to be a hero." Ozzy didn't respond to the insult. He gestured lightly toward the counter. "You were unhappy with your order," Ozzy said. "That happens. It doesn't give you the right to tear someone down." The customer crossed his arms. "You're being dramatic." Ozzy met his eyes. "No," he said, "you are." A murmur rippled through the cafe. The manager, still holding the phone, paused. She watched closely now. Ozzy continued, still calm. "You questioned his intelligence. You questioned his right to be here. That's not feedback. That's humiliation." The customer shifted his weight. "So what?" he said. "I'm supposed to sugarcoat things." Ozzy shook his head. "You're supposed to be human." The words landed quietly, but heavily. The customer opened his mouth to fire back, but nothing came out right away. He tried again. "You don't know me." Ozzy nodded. "I don't need to." He turned slightly, addressing the room. Not loudly, just clearly. "Everyone here saw what happened. We all heard it." Several people nodded. Someone near the window whispered, "He's right." The customer's confidence started to crack. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "You're all overreacting." Ozzy turned back to him. "No," he said gently. "You're uncomfortable because someone finally said no." The employee took a small breath, as if realizing he wasn't alone anymore. Ozzy looked at him and spoke softly, but clearly enough for everyone to hear. "You didn't do anything wrong." The employee's eyes filled not with tears, but with relief. The customer scoffed again, but this time it sounded hollow. "Unbelievable," he said. I come here to get coffee and now I'm getting lectured. Ozzy nodded. That's because this stopped being about coffee a long time ago. The room was completely silent now. Even the customer felt it. He glanced around, noticing the phones, the faces, the shift in energy. You people are crazy, he said weakly. Ozzy didn't argue. He simply said, You're free to leave. The customer laughed nervously. And who's going to make me? Ozzy held his gaze. No one needs to, he said. You've already shown everyone who you are. That was when the customer realized something had gone terribly wrong. Not because Ozzy had threatened him, but because Ozzy hadn't. And in that calm, controlled intervention, the entire cafe had quietly chosen a side. The customer's face flushed red, half with anger, half with embarrassment, though he didn't realize it yet. You think you're special? He spat, trying to regain control of the situation. Ozzy shook his head slowly, his calm demeanor unshaken. No, I don't think I'm special, he said clearly. I think he is. He gestured lightly toward the employee behind the counter. The cafe went quiet again. Phones hovered mid-recording. People leaned in, as if even the air was holding its breath. He shows up every day, Ozzy continued. He works hard, he's polite. He doesn't complain even when the world's not fair. He treats people with respect. Exactly what you're refusing to do. The customer scoffed, trying to force laughter. Come on, don't give me that sentimental crap. Ozzy's eyes locked on his. Sentiment? He asked softly, but firmly. No, this is reality. You don't get to judge him or anyone else based on appearance, ability, or anything other than their actions. And right now, your actions are showing everyone what kind of person you really are. A murmur ran through the cafe. A few customers nodded. Some whispered to each other. The manager straightened, realizing the power of Ozzy's words. The customer's ego tried to push back. You're just defending him because you feel superior, he yelled, waving his hands. Ozzy took a deep breath. No, he said evenly. I'm defending him because it's the right thing to do. And right now, the right thing is for you to stop humiliating someone who doesn't deserve it. The words weren't loud, but they carried weight. Stop. Who do you think you are? You don't work here. The man yelled, his voice cracking slightly. Ozzy didn't flinch. He took a step closer, calm but commanding. I don't need to work here to see injustice. And apparently, you've forgotten the difference between power and respect. Power is fleeting. Respect is earned, and you're losing both. The customer's face went pale. He was shouting, but his words had lost their impact. Even he could feel it. The cafe, the employees, the customers, and even the silent phones all had shifted their attention. He was alone now, surrounded not by enemies, but by witnesses who understood the truth. You don't know me, the man stammered. I deal with people all the time. Ozzy nodded. I understand that. And here, in this room, your behavior speaks louder than any title, any job, or any excuse. Humiliating someone weaker doesn't make you stronger. It makes you smaller. The customer's hand shook. He looked around. The murmurs of the customers, the phones, even the subtle nods of employees. They were all silently condemning him. Ozzy took a final step forward. His voice dropped, steady and certain. You have a choice. Leave now and walk away with your ego intact, or continue and show everyone here the true measure of your character. The choice is yours. The customer swallowed. His mouth opened then closed. He was trapped, not by force, not by threats, but by respect, by dignity, by morality. He glanced at the employee. The young man's eyes were no longer fearful. They were proud, calm, steady, almost glowing with relief and validation. Ozzy looked at him and smiled faintly. You did nothing wrong, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The customer turned away, muttering under his breath. He stormed toward the door, shoulders slumped, ego bruised. The cafe exhaled as one. Phones stopped recording for a second as people realized the scene was over. The young employee stood straighter, finally allowed a small smile to form. Ozzy nodded to him. See, you can stand tall, even when the world tries to push you down. Respect is not given. It's earned by staying strong, calm, and kind. The room had shifted completely. What had started as humiliation ended in admiration for the employee and for the quiet hero who didn't shout, didn't push, but commanded respect with calm authority. Every person present knew they had witnessed something rare. The moment when ego met dignity, and dignity won. The story wasn't over. The video on the phones would travel far beyond the cafe walls. But in this small room, one lesson had already taken hold. Power without respect is meaningless, and courage comes in quiet, unwavering form. The customer had crossed the line, Ozzy had drawn it, and everyone watching understood who truly had the upper hand. The cafe had gone quiet. The tension that had been simmering for the last 20 minutes finally reached a peak. Phones still hovered in the air, recording, but no one spoke. Everyone could feel that something monumental was happening, something more than just an argument over coffee. The customer, still fuming, took a step back from the counter. His face was pale, jaw tight, as if realizing that his usual tactics of intimidation were failing. For the first time, he looked around, and the reality of the situation began to dawn on him. Every person in the cafe was silently judging him. Every phone camera was pointed at him, and standing quietly beside the employee was a man whose calm authority made him shrink inside, though he didn't understand why. A voice from the back whispered, low and incredulous, "Wait, isn't that Ozzy?" Another customer looked, then gasped, "It is Ozzy, the Ozzy. Oh my God." The revelation spread instantly like wildfire. The murmurs grew louder, turning into whispers, then almost a low chorus. "That's Ozzy, the one and only. Holy, I can't believe he's here. He's been watching the whole thing." The customer froze. His confident sneer vanished. His bravado crumbled in real time. He glanced at the corner table where Ozzy had been sitting quietly, observing everything. The realization hit him in a way that no shouting or argument ever could. Who is he?" he asked nervously, his voice cracking. Ozzy didn't smile. He didn't brag. He simply looked at him steadily, calmly, and said, "I'm someone who won't stay silent when someone is being humiliated. That's all you need to know." The customer blinked, unable to formulate a response. His face went red with embarrassment. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder. Some whispered, some laughed softly, and some shook their heads in disbelief. Every eye was on him now. The employee behind the counter looked up at Ozzy, eyes wide with relief. He had been terrified just moments before, but seeing Ozzy standing beside him, calm, confident, unwavering, it gave him strength. Ozzy turned back to the customer, his voice calm but firm. "You humiliated someone who can't defend himself. You thought no one would notice. You were wrong." The customer stammered. I didn't." "You did," Ozzy interrupted gently, yet with undeniable authority. "And now everyone here knows it." The manager, who had been holding the phone in her hand, nodded. "Security is on their way," she said. The customer's shoulders sagged further. He glanced around the room, realizing that he had become the center of shame, not the employee. The cafe erupted in quiet applause, not loud but unanimous. Phones recorded every second. Bystanders whispered stories to each other, their awe evident. The employee, for the first time that day, allowed himself a small smile. Ozzy leaned slightly closer to him, just enough to speak privately but audibly to anyone nearby. "You didn't do anything wrong. None of this was your fault. Stand tall, always." The employee nodded, swallowing hard, fighting back tears. His hands were steady now. He understood that this moment wasn't just about him. It was about dignity, respect, and courage in the face of cruelty. The customer, realizing the weight of his mistake, muttered something under his breath and stormed toward the exit. He didn't make a scene. He didn't argue further. He just left, ego bruised, powerless, completely aware that he had been exposed. As he exited, the murmurs of the cafe continued. Phones still recorded, and soon the video would travel far beyond these walls. But in that moment, everyone present understood a simple truth. The measure of a person isn't in what they take from others. It's in how they stand for them. Ozzy looked around the room, taking in the atmosphere. Calm faces, smiling eyes, phones lowered but still recording the afterglow. Then he looked at the employee and nodded slightly. No words were needed. The message had been delivered. Powerless cruelty had been exposed, respect had been earned, humiliation had been reversed, and quietly, without needing fame or a grand speech, Ozzy had changed the outcome of the day. The cafe, once tense with anger and fear, was now filled with relief, admiration, and a sense of justice restored. Everyone there would remember this moment. The employee would never forget it. And the customer, for all his arrogance, would carry the memory of being completely humbled, not by force, but by calm authority, dignity, and courage. Ozzy had simply stood, watched, and acted with precision, and in doing so, he had reminded everyone present of one undeniable truth: respect always outweighs ego. The cafe was finally quiet. The tension that had gripped the room for nearly an hour had lifted, leaving behind a mix of relief and awe. Phones were still out, screens glowing with the last moments of the confrontation. People whispered to each other, replaying the words, the calm authority, the sheer presence of Ozzy standing beside the employee. The young employee, who had spent the entire day under verbal attack, finally allowed himself to breathe. His hands were no longer trembling. His shoulders, once hunched under the weight of humiliation, straightened. For the first time, he felt seen not just as a worker, not just as someone with Down syndrome, but as a human being deserving of respect. Ozzy leaned slightly forward, offering a reassuring smile. "You didn't do anything wrong," he said quietly, yet his voice carried clearly enough for anyone nearby to hear. "Remember that, stand tall, always." The employee nodded, words failing him, but the feeling in his chest was unmistakable: strength, courage, validation. Meanwhile, the customer had left, humiliated and powerless. His arrogance had crumbled under the weight of calm authority and moral clarity. He had no idea how widely this moment would spread, or how public his embarrassment would become, but that didn't matter to the room. What mattered was the lesson that had been delivered. Dignity and respect triumph over cruelty and ego every time. Phones clicked and hummed as the first videos were shared online. Within minutes, snippets of the encounter began circulating on social media. People were shocked, inspired, and outraged all at once. The title on every post highlighted the most compelling part: "Customer abuses employee with Down syndrome unaware Ozzy is watching." Comments poured in. "Wow, that's incredible, respect above all. This is how real heroes behave, calm, firm, and kind." The employee didn't just survive that. He was protected by courage and integrity. The story spread like wildfire. Millions of people watched, liked, and shared. News outlets picked it up, covering the tale as an example of moral courage in a world that often rewards cruelty. It wasn't just about celebrity, it was about standing up for what's right, quietly, firmly, and with dignity. The employee returned to work the next day with a newfound sense of confidence. Colleagues whispered about what had happened. Customers approached to offer encouragement. And while the employee remained humble, he no longer carried the fear or shame that had weighed him down. He had experienced something rare. Someone had stood with him when it mattered most. Ozzy, meanwhile, left the cafe quietly. No fanfare, no interviews, no grand gestures. His job was done. His presence had been enough. He knew the impact of standing beside someone powerless in the face of cruelty. The message had been delivered, and it didn't need further embellishment. The world noticed. Millions were inspired. The incident became a case study in online discussions about kindness, advocacy, and moral courage. The lesson was clear: you don't need to fight loudly to win. Sometimes standing quietly and supporting the vulnerable is enough to change everything. And in the end, the customer learned a lesson he would never forget. His attempt to humiliate someone else backfired spectacularly. In his effort to assert superiority, he had exposed himself instead. And the employee, strengthened by Ozzy's calm intervention, had gained something far more valuable than protection: the recognition that dignity and courage are always worth standing for. If you believe no one should be judged by appearance, type respect in the comments. Share this story with someone who needs a reminder that courage and kindness always win. And subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. The cafe, once a place of tension and fear, had transformed into a space of hope, admiration, and a reminder that true heroes don't always wear capes. They sometimes just stand quietly and act with integrity, and the world was watching. Do you believe standing up quietly for someone can inspire millions?